My fiancée sent me a text message. She said she had found someone else and told me to deal with it. I replied with a single word, finally. Then I shut down every account I had been paying for. 3 days later, her lawyer began calling me repeatedly. I am 36 years old. I work in finance. I am engaged, or was engaged until last week, depending on how exact you want to be. My fiancé and I were together for 4 years and engaged for 8 months. The wedding was scheduled for early summer. The venue was booked. Deposits were paid. The guest list was nearly complete. From the outside, everything looked solid. Inside the relationship, it felt more like controlled disorder that I kept mistaking for confidence. She has always had a sharp personality, direct, blunt, the type of person who calls it honesty when it is really impatience. Early in the relationship, I convinced myself that was part of her appeal. She was decisive, she knew what she wanted, she did not soften her words. Over time, that sharpness was aimed at me more often, small remarks framed as jokes, comments about my job being stable but dull, comparisons to her friends' partners being more exciting, occasional reminders that I should feel lucky she chose me. We lived together. I paid most of the expenses: rent, utilities, insurance, streaming services, subscriptions, groceries. She contributed occasionally when her freelance work paid well. I was not fully comfortable with that arrangement, but I accepted it because I believed we were moving toward marriage. At least that is what I thought. 3 days ago, while I was at work, I received her message. There was no build-up and no prior discussion, just a statement. She told me she had found someone else and that I needed to deal with it. No apology, no explanation, just dismissal, as if she were ending a contract. What surprised me was not the betrayal. Looking back, the signs were there. What surprised me was the tone, casual, almost smug, as if she expected an emotional reaction, begging, arguing, questions. I did none of that. I replied with one word, finally. Then I stopped engaging completely. No follow-up, no calls, no confrontation. Instead, I spent the rest of the afternoon doing something she clearly had not anticipated. I logged into every account I paid for and shut them down one by one. When I say I cut off every account, I mean everything that quietly kept her life comfortable without her thinking about it. I did not make an announcement. I did not threaten her. I treated it like an overdue administrative task. I started with the joint checking account. I rerouted my paycheck before the business day ended and withdrew my contribution down to the exact amount that was legally mine. I left enough to cover any pending charges to avoid overdrafts. I am not reckless. I am precise. Then came the subscriptions. I canceled the phone plan on my end and ported my number to a new account I controlled. Her phone stayed active for about 6 hours before service stopped. Streaming services were logged out everywhere. Cloud storage was downgraded. The gym membership I paid for froze automatically when the card declined. Next was car insurance. The policy was in my name, and she was listed as a driver. I removed her. The same went for roadside assistance. I canceled the credit card she used for emergencies, which I paid off monthly. I changed passwords on everything tied to my identity: email, banking, utilities. I did not lock her out of the apartment. That would have created unnecessary legal complications. Instead, I packed a bag and stayed with a friend while I considered my next steps. That night, she texted again. The tone had changed. She sounded confused and irritated. She asked why her phone was not working and why the grocery order failed. She added that my behavior was immature and petty. I did not respond. The next day, she escalated. Calls from unknown numbers, emails accusing me of financial abuse, messages shifting between insults and attempts at reasoning.
She said I was overreacting. She said couples survive worse situations. She said I was proving her point about my insecurity. I remained silent. On the third day, I started receiving calls from a local number I did not recognize. Voicemails asked me to return the call regarding an urgent matter. The tone was formal and professional. That's when I realized she had changed tactics. She had contacted a lawyer. The lawyer's voicemail was polite in a way that made it clear he had only heard one side. He said he represented my fiancée in a domestic financial dispute and wanted to discuss urgent concerns regarding shared assets and the sudden withdrawal of support. That wording stood out: shared assets, support. I returned the call once and kept it brief. I told him we were not married. I told him there was no joint lease. I told him there was no prenuptial agreement and no written promise of ongoing financial support. I explained that every account I closed was in my name and funded solely by me. I asked what legal basis existed for his call. There was a pause, not dramatic but deliberate. He asked whether I would be open to meeting to resolve matters amicably. I said I was willing to communicate in writing only. He said his client felt blindsided and destabilized. I responded that his client ended the engagement by message while announcing a new relationship. I explained that my response was to disengage financially and personally. I asked again where the legal issue was. He did not answer directly. That afternoon, my fiancée sent me a long email. This time, there were no insults or bravado. She reframed everything. She said she didn't mean it that way. She said she was emotional. She said I knew she didn't mean deal with it literally. She said I assumed we would talk. She said my reaction was extreme and vindictive. She also listed expenses she believed I should continue covering until she stabilized: rent, utilities, phone, groceries, therapy. She used the phrase transitional support. Reading that made everything clear. This was not about heartbreak. This was about entitlement. I replied once, briefly. I stated the engagement was ended. I said there would be no further financial support. I said all future communication should go through her lawyer. Then I blocked her number again. Within an hour, the lawyer called back. His tone had changed. He sounded cautious rather than confident. He asked if I had time to speak. I said no and requested that he email his concerns. He did. The email was shorter than expected. There were no demands, only clarifying questions. Questions about the lease, about the accounts, about whether I had ever promised continued support in writing, about whether any wedding expenses were refundable. That shift told me everything. He had reviewed the situation and realized this was not leverage, it was noise. Around the same time, she contacted me again using a friend's phone through social media before I blocked that as well. The tone was aggressive. She accused me of trying to ruin her life. She said I was punishing her for being honest. She said real men do not abandon women when things get hard. I did not respond, but I documented everything. When someone starts rewriting events, you keep records quietly. That evening, I returned to the apartment while she was out. I took only what belonged to me: clothes, documents, electronics. I photographed every room before leaving. Everything was clean and undamaged. I left my key on the counter. The next morning, her lawyer emailed again. This time, he said his client wanted to explore mediation rather than escalation. That phrasing made me laugh for the first time in days. There was nothing to mediate. There was no shared future to negotiate. I replied in writing. I reiterated the engagement was ended by her message. I stated that no marriage took place. I stated that no joint assets existed. I declined mediation and requested that any further contact be limited to written communication regarding property retrieval if necessary. 2 hours later, she sent one final email before I blocked that account as well. It was long, bitter, and accusatory. She called me heartless. She said the new man would never treat her this way. She said she expected better from someone who claimed to love her. What she failed to understand is that the moment she said, "I found someone else, deal with it," she stopped being my responsibility.
The first bill she actually noticed was the rent reminder. It was not an eviction notice, just the automated email asking for payment confirmation. She forwarded it to me with a message that said, "This is due tomorrow. What are you doing?" I did nothing. The second shock was her car. She called a mutual friend in a panic because the insurance app would not open and roadside assistance told her she was not covered. She had assumed coverage was automatic, like air. You do not think about it because it is always there. She did not realize it was something I actively maintained. By the end of that day, her tone shifted from anger to fear. She emailed her lawyer again, asking what options she had. He replied by requesting documents she did not have: lease agreements, shared account records, written promises. None existed. The new guy disappeared quietly. I only know because she accused me of turning him against her in one of the last messages that slipped through before I blocked everything. I had never spoken to him. He simply met the version of her that no longer had a financial safety net and decided it was not his responsibility. Her lawyer tried once more. This time he asked whether I would consider temporary assistance to prevent hardship. I replied with a single sentence: "There is no legal or moral obligation for continued support following termination initiated by your client." After that, the calls stopped. A week later, I heard through someone else that she was moving out, not upgrading, downsizing, staying with a friend while she figured things out, selling items she once mocked me for being careful about money over. The irony was clear. That same afternoon, I officially canceled the wedding. I lost deposits and accepted the cost. A clean break, worth every dollar. I did not feel triumphant. I felt calm, clear, the kind of calm that comes when you stop arguing with reality and start aligning with it. What she tried next was public pressure. I woke up to messages from people I barely spoke to anymore: her cousin, a former coworker, one mutual friend who suddenly wanted to check in and hear both sides. That phrase is always revealing. It never means neutrality. It means someone has already heard a version that needs reinforcement. She posted vague statements online about abandonment and betrayal. Nothing with my name attached, just enough for anyone who knew us to connect the dots. Quotes about strong women, posts about men who cannot handle honesty, stories about rebuilding after emotional abuse. I did not react. I did not comment. I did not defend myself. Silence undermines that strategy more effectively than any argument ever could. Then she escalated again. She emailed my parents, not to insult me or accuse me, but to appeal. She wrote about how much she loved me, how confused she felt, how she never intended things to end this way, how she hoped they could talk sense into me. My mother forwarded the email to me with one sentence asking if I was okay. I told her yes and explained everything plainly, no emotion, just facts. She replied that she was proud of me for standing firm and that my father would have said the same thing. That door closed quietly. The final attempt sounded legal, but carried no weight. A letter drafted by her lawyer, but clearly driven by her anxiety. It described emotional reliance and implied expectations without making actual claims. It asked again for discussion. I did not respond. 2 days later, the lawyer sent one final email, short and neutral. He said his client would not be pursuing the matter further and requested confirmation of item pickup times. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just withdrawal. After that, the noise stopped completely. No more posts, no more messages, no indirect contact. The silence felt different this time, not tense, final.
Once the noise faded, I noticed how quiet my own thoughts felt. Not empty, organized, like a room after you finally removed the things you kept tripping over. The first change was practical. My expenses dropped immediately. I was spending less without effort. No constant small drains, no surprise charges, no background stress about whether work was good for her that month. My accounts stabilized in a way I had not realized was missing. The second change was emotional, but not dramatic. I did not spiral. I did not miss her the way I expected. What I missed was a version of the future I had already outgrown. Once that was gone, there was nothing left to argue with. Friends asked how I was holding up. I told them the truth. I felt relieved, not because the relationship ended, but because it ended cleanly. No extended bargaining, no slow collapse, just a clear line and forward movement. I replayed the moment of her text more than anything else, not with anger, but with clarity.
That message was not impulsive. It was confident. She believed she had leverage. She believed I would absorb the shock and continue providing stability while she explored her options. When that assumption failed, everything else collapsed. That realization mattered. It showed this was not a single poor decision, it was a mindset. I also learned something about myself. I am not reactive, I am responsive. When trust breaks at a structural level, I do not debate it. I remove myself from the load-bearing role and allow the situation to stand or fail on its own. She told people I was cold. I am comfortable with that label. Cold suggests distance. What I experienced was alignment. The apartment is gone now. I moved into a smaller place closer to work. It is quiet. It belongs to me. I sleep better. I wake up without tension. A little over a week after everything went silent, she tried to speak to me directly, not through lawyers, not through friends. She showed up in person. I was returning from work when I saw her car parked down the street from my new place. It was a different car, borrowed. She stepped out when she saw me and walked over as if it were a coincidence, as if the timing had not been planned. She looked smaller, not physically, but in presence. The confidence was gone, replaced by urgency. She started speaking before I could say anything. She said she only wanted 5 minutes. She said she deserved that much. I said no. That surprised her more than anything else had. She laughed once, as if I were joking. Then she became frustrated. She said I was being cruel. She said we were engaged and that it meant something. She said I owed her a conversation. I told her the conversation ended when she sent the message. She tried to shift direction. She said she had been angry. She said she did not expect me to actually leave. She said she thought finally was sarcasm. She admitted she assumed I would calm down and we would talk it through. That line mattered. It was the most honest thing she said. She asked if we could start over slowly. No pressure. Just talk. Just see where things went. She said the other man was a mistake. She said she realized what she had lost. I told her I was not angry, and that was why the answer was no. I said trust does not reset simply because circumstances change. I said I was no longer available for reinterpretations of reality. She called me heartless again. She said I was punishing her. I told her consequences are not punishment, they are alignment. I walked past her and went inside. I did not slam the door. I did not look back. Later that night, she texted me from a new number. One sentence. I never thought you would actually leave. That was the point. Watching someone encounter the outcome of their own assumptions is different when you're no longer emotionally involved. It becomes observational instead of painful. She had assumed security without commitment, support without accountability, presence without respect. When those things disappeared, she did not see cause and effect. She saw betrayal. That told me everything I needed to know about how she moved through life. Through mutual contacts, I heard fragments.
She told people I changed overnight, that I blindsided her, that I was controlling with money. That story did not bother me because it required my participation to continue. I was not participating. What stood out most was how quickly she recast herself as the victim of unpredictability. She never acknowledged the message. She never repeated the words she actually used. Finally, with you became, I was honest and he overreacted. That gap between action and narrative is where trust ends permanently. I also learned how much peace comes from firm boundaries. Not threats, not ultimatums, just clear exits. People who benefit from your flexibility will always describe boundaries as cruelty. There was no dramatic closing moment, no apology that would have changed anything, just a gradual realization on her side that there was no angle left, no leverage, no emotional hook. That's when the attempt stopped completely. I do not hate her. Hate suggests unfinished business. What I feel is distance and clarity. She was not a villain, she was a lesson I paid for early instead of late. Where I am now is simple. I am single, I am stable, I am clear about what happened and why it ended. That matters more than comfort. The wedding money is gone, deposits lost. I accepted that immediately. Money recovers faster than trust ever does. I consider it tuition. I paid to learn something before it cost me years instead of weeks. I changed my routines, focused on work, reconnected with friends I had drifted from while trying to balance two lives. I did not rush into anything new. I did not need to replace what I removed. The space itself was the reward. She has not contacted me again. Not directly, not indirectly. The silence held this time because there is nothing left to test, no soft boundary, no emotional backdoor, just absence. That's the cleanest ending I have ever had.